Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal list of Beethoven piano concertos, including the piano arrangement of the Violin Concerto. And I'm still a little swollen here, as you can see, so excuse me if I don't smile as much as I usually do. Hopefully it won't make any difference. Let's see now. What have we got? Oh my. Well, with the Beethoven piano concertos, we only have to deal with 5 works, 6 if we include the piano concerto version of the Violin Concerto. And I'm not going to do the Choral Fantasy, although it actually, I think, shows up here, which is quite handy if we want to throw it in as sort of a bonus. But as usual, I'm going to have 6 different pianists for 6 different works with 6 different conductors and 6 different orchestras, I think. I'm not so worried about that bit, but it's going to be, I think, a very intriguing and helpful selection to get you going on your Beethoven Concerto Odyssey. So let's get right to it and start with Piano Concerto number 1, which, as you know, is actually Piano Concerto number 2, because they were published in opposite order. Now, number 1 is a lovely work. It's full of energy and excitement, and it shows the young Beethoven operating at full power. It really does, especially as a keyboard virtuoso. And the performance I have chosen is Michelangelo and Gillini. This is a wonderfully unique performance. Now, he did 3 of them with Gillini, and the fact of the matter is some of them are quite strange. Michelangelo, as you know, was a pianist of almost superhuman, abnormal perfection of technique and crystalline tone, and some people find his interpretations to be so refined and so perfected and worked over as to be completely cold. And I don't find that's the case in this concerto. It can be. But in going through these selections, I actually had an email exchange back and forth with Jed Disler, the piano maven to end all piano mavens. And some of these we agree on and some of these we don't. This was one of the ones that we did, and I'm sure that once I post this, Jed will chime in and add some of his own alternative thoughts as well, which I always welcome because they're certainly far more informed than mine are. But I think together, we managed to put together a pretty good list. I really do. And Gillini and Michelangelo is a great start for number 1. This is with, the Wiener Symphonic, or the Vienna Symphony, and it is marvelous. The attached third concerto is a little weirder, and that is not going to be my choice for the third concerto. But for the first, you just can't do better. You really can't. Unless you go for the second, in which case I would go for Martha Argerich with Giuseppe Sinopoli and the Philharmonia Orchestra. Now, this contains an absolutely amazing first concerto too, but I like to break them up a little bit. Whereas Argerich is all impetuosity and improvisatory freedom and energy, Michelangelo is just the opposite. He's totally and completely studied, and, I wouldn't say studied in a robotic way, but is not Argerich. Let's put it that way. You wouldn't call Michelangelo improvisational in any way, shape, or form. But Argerich, holy cow. And she's great for the early second concerto, particularly because, she hasn't done 4 and 5 on disc in any case. She's only done 1, 2, 3. And the 3 was not so special, but 1 and 2, in these early works where you have, a young virtuoso sort of licking his chops. Boy, does she dig into these. And she's perfect for the early second concerto, which, like I said, is earlier than the first, because she just captures all of that youthful fire and impetuosity. And if it's not Beethoven's most sophisticated piece formally, it just doesn't make any difference, because she just plays the living daylights out of it, and she's marvelously accompanied. So, Martha Argerich for number 2. Now we come to number 3. And this may be an intriguing choice. This is one about which Jed and I also agreed, because when I was working on my Beethoven book, which hopefully will finally come out next year sometime, I was thinking, performances of the third concerto, really great ones, are not so thick on the field, They're not so easy to come by for some reason. It's a wonderful work. It's in Beethoven's personal C minor key. It influenced so many other concertos that came later, especially the Brahms First Concerto, which kind of cribs from the finale. It really is just lovely, but for some reason it's a tough piece to bring off, and there are a lot of very sort of averagey performances of it. And I wanted something special, and we had a long conversation about this piece, Jed and I think that we've come up with one that really does give just a fantastic view of the work from both the soloist and the orchestra. And here it is, Annie Fischer and Ferenc Fricsay with the the Bavarian State Orchestra. This is just marvelous. This comes out of the big Fricsay box, and so you may have a hard time finding it, but it's worth seeking out. It really is. It's a marvelous performance. I mean, take two neurotic Hungarians and stick them in a room together, and magic happens. Absolutely. This is what you get. Just an amazingly intense, dedicated, exciting performance, full of humanity and warmth and conviction from everybody. Absolutely everybody. A great performance. And one that doesn't get talked about that often, and you don't seem to hear it mentioned. People sort of forgot about it because Annie Fischer's career in the West was not huge, and her discographic legacy is rather small, but she was a dynamite Beethoven pianist, as we know. I mean, she recorded the complete sonatas for Hungariton. They're marvelous. I talked about them in my complete sonata cycle talk, and this version of the third piano concerto is really special. I cannot recommend it more highly. And Fricsay, of course, was just a fantastic conductor and a great Beethoven conductor, and they make wonderful music together. So that is the one I would suggest. My selection for the fourth may also raise an eyebrow or two, but this has always been my go-to performance for the fourth, and that's Yvonne Moravettes with Yuli Tarofsky. Now, let me see. Let's see. It's on this VAI audio disc. It's with the orchestra of the Vienna Musikverein, and it's with Martin Tarnowski. Yuli Tarofsky. I don't know, who's that? I Musici de Montreal guy, I think? Yeah. This is Martin Tarnowski, who is actually Moravettes' brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken. And this performance of the fourth, he remade it for Superfun. It's not as good. This is the VAI version with Martin Tarnowski. That's the guy. Wow, is this hot. This is just terrific. Now, Moravettes was, as you may know, a pupil of Walter Gieseking. He was a chord guy, a touch guy. He had the most exquisite piano tone, and he worked to refine his touch, to try and put as much color into a piece of music as he could. The Beethoven Fourth Concerto is the one that needs that. I mean, just the opening measures, right? Da 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 da. I mean, so many ways to play it. You know, one of my other favorites is Claudio Arrau, because he was also a touch guy. I mean, you cannot put enough color and sensitivity into this concerto. The second movement, right? That dialogue between the strings and the piano with, Orpheus taming the Furies, it's been called. Again, it just requires an exquisite sense of touch. And with all due respect to all the forte pianists and people out there, it is very, very difficult, I think, to do this piece justice on anything other than a modern piano. It can be done, but it's much, much harder. The one thing a modern piano does is exactly what this music seems to require, or which really benefits the work. And even though the sound of it, the sheer sound of this performance is absolutely intoxicating, it truly is, there's no lack of energy. It's a very vivacious performance, too. Everything happens in tempo. I've never heard the rondo theme or the finale phrased with so much fire. I mean, when they're going do 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 do, the piano comes in and it's full of energy, and the dialogue between the piano and the orchestra has never been better realized. So if you can get this on VAI, it's available. Yvonne Moravettes Plays Beethoven is all it's called. So check the contents. the fourth concerto with Martin Tarofsky. It's unbelievable. You also get the E minor piano sonata opus 90 and the C minor variations, the 32 variations in C minor. It's an amazing, amazing Beethoven recording, and just the greatest fourth concerto you'll ever hear. Now, for the fifth concerto, here's a modern cycle, which I think represents really the best in what you can do taking a period approach with modern instruments. And this is a fantastic cycle. It's absolutely fantastic. And so with the Emperor Concerto, I'm going with Yefim Bronfman and David Zinman. This is just a fantastic Beethoven concerto cycle. Really, really one of the great ones. And I think that I have to mention one of the performances in it. And it also comes, as you can see, with the Choral Fantasy and the cantata Mir ist stille und glückliche Fahrt. Such an unfortunate word for a trip, isn't it? A fart, I'm sorry. It's one of those, the other fun thing about German is that the word for poison is gift. So if you've been vergifted, you've been poisoned in German. Such a marvelous language. Anyway, this Emperor Concerto has all of that sort of gushing ebullience and military pomp and swagger that you really want in the piece. And I just love this performance. I have to say, Jed recommended also as sort of, the sleeper version that you'd never think of, the Barbaroli Mindru Katz performance, which is also terrific. I listened to it recently. And it's wonderful. It really is. But I just think if you don't want to get a 104-disc Barbaroli box or a Barbaroli edition version of it for lots of money, and you really want a great Beethoven cycle that you can pursue and a modern performance in the best possible sound with brilliant, brilliant musicians, here you go. Zinman and Bronfman, or Bronfman and Zinman, depending on what order you want to put them in. This is just a great, great, exciting, passionate Emperor, full of conviction and sparkle and glitter and a very beautiful slow movement, but that flows. It doesn't just sit there like some of them can, and moon about. It's really marvelous, absolutely marvelous, and it's a great cycle. And I'm always so happy to hear great modern performances of these works, because it's important that we know that not all the great musicians are dead, not all the great music making is over, that there are still fabulous performances around the corner. Excuse me. Speaking of which, now we come to the Violin Concerto in its piano arrangement. Now, as you know, the piano arrangement of the Violin Concerto is rather bad. I mean, as a piano work, it's really, you're taking a single melody instrument and trying to turn it into a keyboard part, so you have to give the left hand something to do. And so all it can do is sort of noodle with accompaniment figuration or try and echo what the orchestra's doing, and it's not very effective as a conception. However, the reason you listen to Opus 61A, which is what I think this thing is, or something like that, the piano version of the Violin Concerto, is because of the wacky cadenzas that Beethoven wrote in the first movement and in the finale. And, he added these piano cadenzas where the piano gets to do its thing. And in the first movement, of course, the cadenza also has a solo timpani part, and it becomes this insane march. It's demented. And it's just wonderful. And, some violinists have configured that march for the violin. And, that cadenza so that they could add it to the Violin Concerto because it's so wacky. And I love the work just for that reason. But, and it's long. I mean, it's big. It really changes your perception of how the movement goes. So, why not hear it? And there have been really quite a few recordings of it. It's been quite popular. But the one I've chosen is another newish recording, which is quite splendid. And it really shows, again, the marvelous melding of old and new when you take a somewhat period instrument approach, but with modern instruments or modern piano in any case. And it's this one, Thomas Dausgaard and Boris Berezovsky. This is a terrific series, also a terrific series of Beethoven piano concertos, I have to say. And you get a very good fourth concerto on this disc. It's on CMAX, the CMAX label. And let's see, what is it? Boris Berezovsky with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra of Örebro. Orebro. One of my Swedish viewers will tell me how to pronounce it, I'm sure. Anyway, this is a terrific, terrific performance because it's fresh and it's lively and it makes it almost sound like a piano concerto in its intention. And I also want to give a shout out to this whole series. It's the complete Beethoven orchestral works, and it's a wonderful series. It's expensive. It's not in a box. You have to get everything individually. It's hard to find. It's very difficult to source. Some bits of it seem to be out of print. I don't know, but I want to mention it because it exists, and if you hear some of it, you may enjoy it. You may want to sample it, and this is really, I think, the best version out there of the piano version of the Violin Concerto. It's just terrific. And, CMAX is an odd label, I have to say. I got to tell you a CMAX story. The Sim and the Ax are the names of the founders of the label. They were Sim and Axel and Simon or something. I don't know. Simax is how it worked out. And I met them decades ago in Bergen, in Norway. And I was joking around. We were sitting around in the bar of the hotel. And he said to me at the time, so how do you get reviews? And I was joking around and I said, well, let's see. I'll send you the price list. I mean, a good review is $100 and a mediocre review is $75 and a bad review is $50. And he said to me, why do I have to pay for a bad review? I said, because there's no such thing as bad publicity. I thought it was a very funny conversation. Then he turned around and said I was trying to bribe him. He told someone else. It came back to me. I was like, holy cow. That's when I learned, this was sort of at the start of my career. I learned that classical music people don't have the best sense of humor. They truly do not, especially people in the record industry. But it was a very funny conversation, and I love the CMAX label. I mean, they do marvelous, marvelous work. They often have really fabulous sonics and engineering, too. And this is a great series. And if you're out there listening, CMAX, please take all these recordings, put them in a box, issue them at a decent price. It's a wonderful set. I'd love to review the whole thing. You've got all the symphonies, but the interesting thing about this series is that they don't have a recording of the Violin Concerto. They have the piano version of the Violin Concerto because that covers the Violin Concerto. So you can say it's the complete Beethoven orchestral works, even without having the Violin Concerto. But it's really a terrific series. And again, it's Berezovsky, Thomas Dausgaard, and the Swedish Chamber Orchestra, Orebro. It's wonderful. So those and that collection, and let's run it through it again because it's not a very large list. For the Beethoven piano concertos, Michelangelo and Gillini in number 1, Argerich and Sinopoli in number 2, Annie Fischer and Ferenc Frickjoy in number 3, Yvonne Moravettes and Martin Tarofsky in number 4, Bronfman and Zinman in number 5 on Artie Nova, and on CMAX, Dausgaard and Berezovsky in the piano version of the Violin Concerto. And along the way, you can get a really good choral fantasy from Bronfman and Zinman. And that does it for the Beethoven piano concertos. It's an ideal list by any standard. It doesn't get more ideal than that. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.